Have you ever had a situation in your life that just hit you so hard that you had a tough time accepting it? You see, when we internally fight against acceptance in our lives, accepting things, I have found it just really adds to the pain and suffering in our lives. Whenever we fight against negative emotions, it just creates more heartache within us. So today, I'm going to talk about radical acceptance, which radical acceptance, it creates this amazing ability to be able to let go of the need to control, the need to judge. You break free of wishing things were really different than they are. So I want to talk about three components of radical acceptance so we can actually respond healthily and spiritually to those tough circumstances that inevitably hit us all without necessarily having to react to them negatively. There is this powerful story in the Old Testament, and even though it happened a long, long time ago, it actually gives our contemporary spiritual lives, it actually encourages them to resilience and peace. So let me introduce you to somebody. This is a painting of Mohini and her cub, and it's from Life magazine back around the mid-century, 20th century. Now, psychologist Tara Brach, she tells the story of Mohini, which is this regal white tiger who lived many years in the Washington National Zoo. And for most of those years, Mohini's home was the old lion house, which was this typical 12 by 12 cage with iron bars and a cement floor. And Mohini spent all her days pacing relentlessly back and forth in her cramped corners. Now, eventually, some biologists and zoologists and other zoo staff, they said, let's create a new habitat for her. And it was going to cover acres, had acres to it. It had hills, it had a pond, it had a variety of vegetation. They tried to recreate the wild. And when the time came to release Mohini into her new, wonderful, expansive environment, something happened. It was just too late for Mohini. When she was released, this beautiful animal who was meant to be wild and free, Mohini sought a corner of this vast refuge, and she just paced back and forth until she etched a 12 by 12 square into the grass. And Mohini did that over and over, this beautiful, majestic tiger. And she did that for the remainder of her life until she died. And it's just so sad. The story makes me so sad because, one, I love animals, and it's such a beautiful animal. I also think this story is apropos to our own lives because one of the biggest tragedy of our lives is, even though we have this vast life out there, there is greater and greater freedom that's possible for us. Yet some of us can pass years just kind of etching this unhealthy pattern in our lives, especially when it comes to acceptance of life, of ourselves. We can, like Mohini, we can just end up trapped in our own unworthiness and our lack of ability to accept ourselves. And some of us go for years, don't we, like Mohini, just etching the same patterns. And you know it to be true, right? The struggle is real, isn't it? And The struggle is usually silent in our lives. It's never violent. It's often repressed. It's often hidden. And here's the deal. A lot of us go much of our lives in denial about this struggle. To actually admit it, to say it is too vulnerable. And we come up with all kinds of coping mechanisms to either deny it or to, deal with it. And so this struggle is very real, and a lot of us have gone a long time avoiding it, but it leaks out, doesn't it? And it leaks out all the time, and not in recognizable forms. It comes out in the way of stress. It might come out in the way of feeling overwhelmed. It may come out in the way of comparing ourselves to other people, or maybe even feeling like we're lazy, we're not being productive. It comes out in shame, how we pressure ourselves to be more, to do more. It comes out in ways where we can wallow in regret. Some of us latch on to unhealthy relationships. We're not able to keep healthy boundaries. So this struggle, it leaks, and it's real, isn't it? There's this amazing story in the Hebrew Bible in the Old Testament. When King David, the king of Israel, he just makes a huge blunder in his personal life. The blunder is so huge, it's caused all kinds of circumstances, consequences in his personal life. So much so that he's now standing over his little baby, his baby boy who is now dying. So let me read this to you in 2 Samuel chapter 12. And this will kind of give some keys and these three components to radical acceptance. Let's read this. So David went without eating because of his sorrow, and he begged God to make the boy well. David would not sleep on his bed, but spent each night lying on the floor. His officials stood beside him and tried to talk to him about getting up, but he would not get up or go eat with them. After the child had been sick for 7 days, he died. But the officials were afraid to tell David. They said to each other, "Even when the boy was alive, David wouldn't listen to us. How can we tell him his son is dead? He might do something terrible." David noticed his officials whispering, and he knew the boy was dead. "Did my son die?" he asked. "Yes, he did," they answered. David got up off the floor. He took a bath. He combed his hair and dressed. He went into the Lord's tent and worshiped. Then he went back home. David asked for something to eat, and when some food was brought to him, he ate it. His officials said, "What are you doing? You went without eating and cried for your son while he was alive. But now that he's gone, you're up and you're eating." David answered, "While he was still alive, I went without food and cried because there was still hope. I said to myself, who knows? Maybe the Lord will have pity on me and let the child live. But now that he's gone, why should I go without eating? I can't bring him back. Someday I will join him after my death, but he can't return to me now." Then David went to his wife Bathsheba, and he comforted her. Eventually they slept together, and she became pregnant again and had another son, whom David named Solomon. The Lord loved Solomon. For me, David is in the process of radical acceptance. Now, what is radical acceptance? The term was first coined by a psychiatrist giving some students advice about their wellness. And then it was further developed by a therapist named Marcia Linehan, who was helping individuals with borderline personality disorder and be able to have more adaptive thoughts. But then the concept of radical acceptance, it just spread to our daily lives. And the whole concept of radical acceptance, it already is a cornerstone in Christian spirituality. But I do love how Linehan defines it. Look what she says. Radical acceptance rests on letting go of the illusion of control and a willingness to notice and accept things as they are right now without judging. That is so good. And then later, psychologist Dr. Tara Brach, she popularized the term radical acceptance in her book, Radical Acceptance, that's what it's called. And she applies it to our everyday lives in us accepting ourselves. This is what Brach says. Radical acceptance is the willingness to experience ourselves and our lives as it is. And I'll say this, if you've never read Tara Brach's book, Radical Acceptance, I would. It is just a great, great book. Now, radical acceptance has three main components, and let's go back to the scriptures, actually verse 18. Let me read this to you and point out component one. After the child had been sick for 7 days, he died. But the officials were afraid to tell David. They said to each other, even when the boy was alive, David wouldn't listen to us. How can we tell him his son is dead? He might do something terrible. David noticed his officials whispering, and he knew the boy was dead. Did my son die? He asked. Yes, he did, they answered. Now, at first, David's officials, well, they aren't sure they should tell him. They're kind of scared to tell him. They have doubts that David can handle reality, but it turns out not to be the case. He can handle reality. So here's component number one to radical acceptance. We have to see reality. We have to see it. We have to be aware of it. So what is your current situation? Are you seeing it clearly? Are you perceiving it honestly? Are you denying anything? You know, people will often say, you know, I can't deal with this, or this isn't fair. This can't be true. It shouldn't be this way. It's almost, we almost think that if we deny it to ourselves, then we'll actually deny reality from being true, or that we think accepting something means I'm okay with it. That's not what acceptance means. Listen, it is exhausting to fight reality, and it doesn't work. Refusing to see things for what they really are. You didn't get the job or promotion you wanted to get. Yes, that friend you loved, they did betray you. This unfortunate thing happened to you. When we can't see reality, it's just going to add to the pain of our life. Listen, of course, no one wants to experience pain. None of us wants to experience sadness or loss or disappointment. But those experiences, right, they're part of our lives. And when you and I attempt to avoid it, attempt to resist the motions of it, this is not seeing it, you and I are going to end up building a bigger emotional weight. We'll create more misery by trying to, in a sense, look another way. And so life is full of experiences. Some of them you enjoy, others of them you dislike. Some are fortunate, some are misfortunate. But when we push them away, or we avoid the feelings of sadness and pain, as Brene Brown says, if you diminish those, you also diminish joy in your life. And you'll just create more angst and anxiety. And this is so destructive. And some of us end up picking destructive behaviors to get through this. We overwork too much, we drink too much, or we get lost with a social media addiction. And it's all to avoid the pain. And we think it's working in the short run, but obviously in the not so long run, it just makes things worse, right? Acceptance means that you turn away from your resisting, ruminating resistance, and you choose to actually see, you choose to be aware of it. It doesn't mean you approve of it. It doesn't mean you're okay with it, but you're just honest and you see reality. And don't use hyper-Christian spirituality and supernaturalism to not see things. What's amazing about David, he even initiates, he moves towards these guys who are afraid to tell him. And he says, listen, my son died, didn't he? He died, didn't he? He's dealing with reality. So component number one is seeing it. Are you seeing your reality? So here's component number two to experiencing radical acceptance. Let's go back to the scriptures, verse 21. His officials said, "What are you doing? You went without eating and cried for your son while he was alive. But now that he's gone, you're up and eating." David answered, "While he was still alive, I went without food and I cried because there was still hope. I said to myself, who knows, maybe the Lord will have pity on me and let the child live. But now that he's gone, why should I go without eating? I can't bring him back. Someday I will join him after my death, but he can't return to me now." So after you and I see reality, after you see this is my life, what are you going to do? Are you going to deny this thing? Are you going to accept it? David accepts it. Before the child dies, David is thinking, okay, the outcome is still unknown, so he begs God to change it. But then his son dies. And here's what happens. Component number two to experiencing radical acceptance is we have to now accept reality. Not only do we see it, we now have to accept it. This is how you heal. You deal with it healthily. You accept reality, and that means you will experience less spiritual detachment. You'll experience less spiritual hyperbole, and you'll even help your emotions heal as you move along. So take steps towards accepting the truth instead of steps away from it. Does this real situation that hopefully you see, does it bring up emotions? Does it trigger things? Sure, I bet it does. My suggestion is let those emotions simmer inside you. Let them sit there. Don't judge them. Feel them. Experience them. Radical acceptance means you completely and you totally accept something to the depths of your soul. You accept it with your heart, your mind, your spirit. You stop fighting reality, and when you stop fighting reality, you begin to suffer less. You begin to have less reactive anger, right? You can walk by that person who got the promotion that you deserved. When you see the person who's now dating your boyfriend or girlfriend, you just don't seethe with this destructive resentment. Now, it takes time, there's no doubt. But you move beyond the life of Mohini. You move beyond the 12 by 12 square thing you etch. Okay, let's go back to the scriptures and let's look at the third component. Let's look at verse 24. Then David went to his wife Bathsheba, and he comforted her. Eventually they slept together, and she became pregnant again and had another son whom David named Solomon. The Lord loved Solomon. So here we see component number 3, and to experience radical acceptance, we now move forward. Now, the timeline of all of this, we don't really know, but the point here is made. First, there is feeling it. There's a time of comfort, which means there's tears, there's pain. This is part of seeing it. This is part of accepting it, to feel it. It's dealing with their reality. It's accepting it, which allows them to heal. And now that they're healing, they're now free to move forward. And it's true for you and me. Now that we see our situations clearly and have taken that comfort and healing, to actually feel it, to cry about it, to grieve it, to mourn it, to accept it. This is what heals our lives in a way that allows us to move forward. So we see, to experience radical acceptance, we see reality. We don't avoid it. We then accept reality. It doesn't mean you agree with it or have to even like it, but you deal with the truth of it. And when you go through that process, you begin to heal in a way that then you can move forward. Now, let me say some words about self-acceptance. The way out of our personal cage, our personal Mohini cage, it begins with learning to accept absolutely everything that we are feeling and thinking about ourselves. It's absolutely accepting everything about our lives. Now, when I say accepting, I don't mean you perceive the harsh self-criticalness towards yourself. That's not what I mean. It doesn't mean you affirm this negative voice in you that says, I think I'm totally a loser. No. When we embrace with awareness the moment by moment experiences of our life, and we just see the reality and accept what is happening, we accept it in our mind, our body, our spirit, and then we don't try to control it. We don't judge it. We don't pull away from it. Again, I don't mean we put up with harmful behavior, that how someone is treating us or how we're treating ourselves. That's not radical acceptance. That's not what I mean. But I mean you just see the reality. You radically accept what is true around you and how you do feel about yourself. Not saying it's true, but you go, I really treat myself this way. I really am feeling this sorrow, this pain. And it means feeling it. And you don't judge it. You don't moralize it. You just, in a sense, detach from it. And you clearly recognize what is happening inside you. And then you hold an open and kind and loving heart. That's radical acceptance. Okay, before we go, I want to actually give you some exercises that will help you to experience radical acceptance. These are some things that you can actually learn and grow in and practice. And I think they help me. I think they'll really help you. The first one is somatic, and the first one deals with your breath. So whenever you're being pulled in a certain way, whenever you're feeling the stress and tension of life, whenever you're becoming aware that you're reacting, that you're not accepting of something, go right to your breath. It is an actual physical way to take a pause. Start to slow down your breath. Start to mindfully become aware of your breathing, and breathe out and in at a good pace, and focus your mind on that. And by the way, this is not gobbledygook or some mystical weirdness. This is just good attachment to your body and good control. It's good maturity. And it just, when you begin to do this physically, you will feel your body calm. You will feel your mind still. You'll be able to stay centered and able to see reality for what it is, so you can then evaluate it and accept it better. So breathing is the first exercise. Here's the second exercise. Some of you already know how to do mindfulness or centering prayer, but the more you can learn about mindfulness and centering prayer, or I'll just say this, just good old-fashioned time out for reflection. And if you can do that, and when you do mindfulness and centering prayer and reflection, you focus on your thoughts, certainly accepting them, but also separating yourself from your thoughts. What do I mean by that? We need to be aware and accept our thoughts. I am thinking negative. I am thinking resentment towards this person. I am worried about this. So this is part of seeing reality and accepting it. But the separation is this. Oh, am I adding more to this story? Am I creating a story that I don't really know is true? Am I demonizing something or someone by fueling it with my negative thoughts? Am I catastrophizing? So when you can do some mindfulness and reflection on these things, you can even go, okay, those are my thoughts. I am feeling that. I am demonizing this person. I am seething with this. So it's important to acknowledge that reality. But then you can take a step back and go, you know what? I'm just being paranoid. You know what? I'm just fueling this with a speculative story, and I really don't even know how it's going to turn out. And this just helps you to see reality. It helps you then to accept what is and isn't. Maybe the outcome, you don't know the outcome yet. So you're able to then stay and accept that you're in a waiting mode. So the second one is reflect and examine your thoughts. The third one is practice examining your expectations. So are your expectations of yourself, of a situation, of others, are they real? Or are they pumped up by something that you are fueling? Because sometimes our expectations are setting us up to fail at our own acceptance of something or someone, of ourselves. We've pumped up something so much that now it's really hard to back off that expectation, and now we're having a tough time accepting something or someone or ourselves. So it's just good practice. This is what keeps us centered spiritually and in reality. This is what keeps us away from even hyperbolic spirituality, is just being very attentive to reality and being attentive to our expectations. Here is the fourth one. Acknowledge your emotions. We talked about that. Accept them, but I'm actually going to ask you to try something. Actually speak them, say them out loud. So when you think them, actually let yourself hear them. You don't have to announce it to the world. Just announce it to yourself. Say out loud, I do this. Oh, I'm really anxious about this. I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed by this. I am really angry at this or this person. I've spent a great deal of my life, especially from my weird, rigid Christianity, that having negative thoughts, negative feelings, that meant I was unspiritual. So let alone think them, I would never speak them. But now I'm at the place where I'm able to say them to myself, and there are several safe people in my world that I can say what I'm thinking and feeling to those people, and they hear me without judgment. And when I'm able to hear myself say them, which is partly acknowledging reality. Remember what I said? You see reality, then you accept reality, and when you do those two things, now you can move forward. So when you say these things, when you hear yourself say these things, this is part of seeing, accepting, and you go, oh yeah, I'm still struggling with resentment towards this person. Yeah, I'm still holding on to this, or I still got to do some repair work here, or I got to do some deep work myself. When you can say these things, it just helps you then move forward. And then here's the fifth one. Use your feelings as signposts. So acknowledge and accept your feelings. Okay, I'm angry, I'm resentful, I'm worried, I'm fearful, I'm paranoid, whatever it is. All feelings are good. There's no negative feelings. It's not like joy and gladness are good feelings and anger and sadness are bad feelings. No, all feelings are human and they're good. So acknowledge your feelings without judgment. Use them as signposts. My feelings are telling me this, but this. Always weigh your feelings against what is actually happening to what might be happening. So are your feelings a response to what reality is? This is where it's good to a signpost. Or are you now catastrophizing your feelings, going overboard on your feelings, and you're starting to feel things about something that hasn't even actually happened yet? Talk about reality. It's not real. And yet you're really feeling something based on something that isn't real. And so the more you can use your feelings as a signpost, absolutely, what are they telling me? But you're also evaluating them, reality or unreal. It just helps you to be able to see reality better, so then you can accept or wait in reality better. So these are some things that you can actually start practicing each day, little by little, each week, that will help you with radical acceptance.